Welcome him here tonight. Please welcome Governor Charlie Baker.
So thank you very much, Kim. And let me just say that on behalf of the Commonwealth of Mass, how much we appreciate having JVS as a partner of ours. I'll get around to talking about David in a minute here, but since a couple of other people shared the stage before me, I couldn't resist this opportunity to just say what a treasure Barry Schrage has been to this community for so many years. So that's one of the things that happens when you get older, is you have an opportunity to actually watch the arc of somebody's career and their influence over the course of that time in first person. I met Barry when I was working for Bill Weld and Paul Cellucci back in the early 1990s, and I've had a chance to get a firsthand look at what he has been able to do and how he has been able to move this community on so many different issues over the course of his time at CJP. And my wife Lauren and I, who's with me tonight, had a chance to travel to Israel with Barry and a host of other folks to talk about digital healthcare and cybersecurity. But I must say that the thing that amazed me the most about our time there, and it was an incredibly moving experience for both of us, was I've never been in a place that has the capacity to honor such a deep and rich and important and mind-blowing history at the same time that they run at 1,000 miles an hour into the future with so much urgency and sense of purpose. And I really came away from that whole thing thinking that Israel is a special place in ways that go way beyond its innovative capabilities and its technology. And as somebody who grew up in Massachusetts and always thought we were like old, having been around for 250 years, it was really spine-tingling to be in a place where, when you're wandering around that old city, you're standing in places that were town squares and open markets thousands and thousands of years ago. And Barry, you've managed to share that sort of thing with a lot of people over the course of your career, and we are all better off for it. So thank you for everything. I also just want to take this opportunity to say that while national politics, which both Jerry and Barry talked about, are kind of messy here in Massachusetts, we work pretty hard to find common ground instead of seeking opportunities to yell and scream at each other from the corner. And one of the pieces of legislation we managed to get done last year was a pay equity bill here in Massachusetts, which had a lot of bipartisan support. And I gave the first pen when I signed that bill to State Treasurer Deb Goldberg, because that was one of her biggest priorities heading into the legislative process, right? You know, Barry and Jerry both talked about the importance of inclusion, and they talked about it in a way that I'm not even going to try to duplicate. They talked about the morality of it as well as the utility and the value of it. But I also just want to talk about it a little differently. Lauren and I have 3 kids, and they're 26, 23, and 20 years old. We have 2 boys and a girl. And when our boys were 13 and 10 and our daughter was 7, we started to go to what became literally years and years and years of bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs, okay? As everybody hit that magic number. And the first one we went to we saw something that we saw happen over and over again for the better part of the next 10 years, which was a mom and a dad standing there in front of a congregation, their friends and their families and their fellow members of the congregation, and speaking to the joy and the pride that they felt in their son or their daughter, and their hopes and their dreams for that child's future. And I get emotional when I talk about it now. I'd never seen anything like that before in my life. And it was so moving to me that when our kids turned 13, we called them into the kitchen. This is no joke. And we sat them around the island in the kitchen, and we read them a letter. And that letter was our way of saying, we are so proud of you, and we love you, and we have nothing but the highest hopes and expectations for you, and we will always be there for you. And our kids liked it so much that they said, you need to do it again when I turn 16, when I turn 18, when I turn 21, when I turn 25. And this has become a little family ritual for us. Now, my wife would say it's become a family ritual for me. But the bottom line is, you know, I never would have seen that if I hadn't, we never would have seen that if we hadn't been invited by our friends of the Jewish faith whose kids were reaching that magic moment in their development. And I guess the point I'm trying to make here is some of the most important reasons for pluralism, for inclusion, for appreciation of other cultures and other religions, and frankly, other points of view and other nationalities and people who don't look necessarily like you, is because there are diamonds there. There are things you will never, ever, ever experience or understand or grow from if you aren't able to make those connections and have those kinds of moments. And I say to people all the time that when I ran for governor the second time, you know, I made a commitment to myself that I was going to get into as many communities as I possibly could and talk to a lot of people that I knew weren't going to vote for me, because it was important for me to recognize and understand and to communicate to people that whatever our differences were, I wanted to be able to serve 100% of the Commonwealth. And I literally met people during the course of that campaign who literally looked at me and said, you know, I have never actually met a Republican before. I don't really see, you don't seem to have a tail. You don't sound that bad. I'm still not going to vote for you, but I really appreciate you showing up. But Lauren and I have talked, it made me, I was so much better as a candidate and as a person, and ultimately as an elected official for having done it, because those conversations brought so many points of view and perspectives into my life and into Lauren's that wouldn't have been there otherwise. And we are so much richer for the mosaic that represents America than we are by thinking if we just play inside our own tent, we'll grow the way we grow if we have a chance to benefit and learn from others. And that brings me to my final point about JVS and this community generally. When I was Health and Human Services Secretary back in the 90s, I spent a lot of time with Hebrew Rehab, which eventually became Hebrew Senior Life. Hebrew Rehab was doing things in the early 90s that nobody else in senior care was doing anywhere else, certainly in Massachusetts, and I would bet anywhere in America. And the intellectual capital that they brought to the way to think about serving. By the way, could we just give all of the service people in here a big hand? You guys are killing it tonight. Thank you very much. But Hebrew Senior Life was this, Hebrew Rehab, eventually Hebrew Senior Life, was this incredibly interesting organization. And I remember going out and talking to Maury May and then to Len about their visions for how this was all going to work in the future. And there was simply nobody else who was thinking as constructively and as creatively about services to seniors as they were. And a lot of what they had to say eventually got incorporated into policy development that I did when I worked for Weldon Salucci, and a lot of things that happened after that. And that was a major league contribution to the way we think about serving seniors here in Massachusetts. And I sort of feel the same way about Jewish Family and Children's Services, which again brought some really interesting notions and ideas about newborns and early childhood development to the conversation. And JVS has been a remarkable leader intellectually and programmatically in the whole process of helping people find their way to work, coming from a whole variety of different backgrounds and a whole variety of other situations and circumstances. And it's, for me, I sit there and I say, okay, this group was established in 1938 to help Jewish immigrants find their way into the world of work here in America. And they have taken, you have taken, Jerry, you and everybody else have taken all these really wonderful things you've learned and experiences you've had and knowledge you've developed and pushed it into the larger community and made it part, provided this gift, this treasure to everybody else so that we can incorporate a lot of the really smart practices and learnings that JVS has into the way we think about helping people start to climb that ladder in their own right. And, I say all the time to people that, I'm one of these kids who started on third base. My mom and dad were happily married for 60 years. I even got both sides of the political equation. My mom was a liberal Democrat. My dad was a Republican. Is a Republican. They canceled each other out for 60 years. I don't think they ever voted for the same person. We grew up in a nice town. I went to great public schools. I got a great education. But I know that I started from a very different place than a lot of other people do. I'm incredibly lucky. I married up like every other man in this room. And believe me, anybody who's met my wife knows I speak the truth on that one. But the point here is the power of what JVS and organizations like JVS do is they help people run a very long race. I am always amazed at how far people are able to travel with a little help and a little support and a little guidance and a little advice. It's a miracle. And in many ways, it is the miracle of America. And for all of you who have been part of JVS, you have had your own opportunity to be part of this miracle here in the Commonwealth, where you help people run far, okay? And in many cases, it's a distance far greater traveled than anything certainly I've traveled or many others have. And it is emblematic of everything this country is supposed to be all about. Now, Lauren and I were both very happy and pleased and honored to be here tonight to support and congratulate and recognize all the work that JVS does, but also to recognize and support our friend Dave Rosenberg. And, you know, first of all, Dave, Shelby is your greatest accomplishment. Shelby's worked for the administration for a long period of time, and man, she's really something. But what makes, I know, look, she's the one I know, okay? And I couldn't really go there in quite the way I wanted to, never mind. But the point here is, in David, you have somebody who's been a tremendously successful person in business, but who has always, always, always given back in a big way to the communities he's been part of and to the organizations he's had a chance to work with. And in particular, his work with JVS and transitions to work has been an incredibly important part of JVS. It's been an incredibly important part of Prime Motor, and it's been this wonderful example of how somebody can lead not just by sort of providing psychic support for something, but literally providing the support that means I'm actually going to be in with you, working hard to ensure that folks you're working with can find a place and a home in our organization and become part of our team and become productive members of society, and folks who get up every day having also traveled far with respect to what's possible and what they're able to achieve. And Dave, as a former employer here in the Commonwealth, but especially as a public servant here in Massachusetts, I really appreciate the chances and the opportunities that I have to say thank you to people like you who never forget where they came from, are always there to lend a hand, and really do believe in this notion that it's up to all of us to help everybody succeed. So congratulations on this honor tonight. It's richly deserved.